Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional League, Dynasty League, PPR League, IDP League, even Daily Fantasy Football League. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Alright, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, and as always, I'm your host, Jesse Tapia. And don't mean to toot my own horn or anything like that, but for those of you that listened to the show last week and took my fantasy advice, you might have done pretty well. You might have done all right. All right. Cam Newton, I said that he'd probably have a big game. He had 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, didn't throw any interceptions. Alex Smith, I said he'd probably be the safest quarterback to play. Had around 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. I said to stay away from Kareem Hunt. That was the best call I made last week, too. I said to stay away from Kareem Hunt. I was going off a ledge right there, making that pick, telling you guys to do that. I said, stay away. Tennessee's got a solid rush defense. What happened? The guy had like 11 carries for less than 50 yards, I think it was. Might have been less than that. All right. I said Tyreek Hill was going to have a solid game. He had around 7 catches, 87 yards, I think it was. Travis Kelce, I said he was going to have a big game. Almost had 100 yards by the end of the first half. Did have a touchdown. Came away that game injured. If he didn't get injured, I would have been right. All right. Said stay away from Marcus Mariota. He did throw a touchdown to himself. Did throw an interception, though. I did call that Marcus Peters interception, though. I did say he was going to throw an interception to Marcus Peters. All right, so we did that. What other game? We talked about all the games, so let's talk Rams, Falcons. I was a little bit wrong about Julio Jones. Okay, I didn't think he was going to have the kind of game he did have. 94 yards, touchdown. Did have 9 receptions also. Mohamed Sanu, I said he'd be like a serviceable number 2 guy. I said Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp would be serviceable number 2 and number 3 guys, both of them. All right. Robert Woods had like 7 catches for 142 yards. Cooper Kupp had 8 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. All right. I said to stay away from Jared Goff, really, because it was his first playoff game. He did all right. Let's see. Devontae Freeman, I think he did have a touchdown and 69 yards, so that's pretty decent numbers. Todd Gurley had 100 yards rushing, only 10 yards receiving. I was wrong on that one, I think. Let's see. What other game was there? Buffalo, Jacksonville. I said stay away from Buffalo. Pick up Jacksonville's defense. Stay away from Blake Bortles. Leonard Fournette let me down. That was one of them I got wrong. So we'll say I got Julio. I got Todd Gurley. Leonard Fournette wrong. What else? Nothing else happened fantasy-wise in that Jacksonville-Buffalo game. That game was really boring. And then for the final game, like I said Cam Newton was going to have a big game. 349 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a big game. Also had 40 rushing yards. Boom. All right. Christian McCaffrey said he was going to have a big game. Had 6 receptions, 101 yards, and a touchdown. Greg Olsen said he was going to have a good game. Got that right. Let's see. What else? Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara. I don't remember what I said about them. Actually, I said it was going to be high scoring, so I got those wrong. So, I didn't get everything right. But if you listen to me like half of the time on half of the things I said, you probably did well last week. So now we got this week. We got the Tennessee Titans, New England Patriots. We'll talk about that game first. We're going to do it like how the show was last week, too. We're going to talk about each game in each segment and talking about which players, which defenses you need to pick up for your daily fantasy. All right. So we'll talk Titans, Patriots first. Next up, what do we want to do? Should we just go Saturday games first, then Sunday games, or should we do AFC and then NFC? Let's see. Let's go Atlanta, Philadelphia, second segment. Third segment, we'll go Jacksonville. Actually, we'll go Jacksonville. Yeah, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh. Actually, no, we're going to go AFC first, then NFC for the last two segments. I got a lot to say about Jacksonville, Pittsburgh. Usually, second segment is where I say the most. All right, yeah, so we'll go Tennessee, New England first, then Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, then Atlanta, Philly for the third segment, and then we'll wrap it up with New Orleans versus Minnesota. Let's get into it. Tennessee versus New England. This game does not excite me at all. Not really looking forward to it too much. All right, so let's start off on Tennessee's side of the ball. Okay, so last week I said that you should probably stay away from most of their players on offense. I said Derrick Henry might be someone you go for. That's the only person. And Derrick Henry broke off for 156 rushing yards last week. Don't believe did he have a touchdown last week? Can't remember. If they had 156 yards and a touchdown, I mean, if you picked him up, congrats. Do the same thing this week. No DeMarco Murray. All right. Derrick Henry's going to have a big game. New England's offensive line is non-existent. Their linebackers aren't that good. And Derrick Henry was running like a monster last week. A monster. Did whatever he wanted. So this week, I think Derrick Henry's another guy you should pick up. And yeah, definitely go Derrick Henry. Let's see, who else do we like? Do we like anyone in the receiving end? I don't, honestly. I don't even like Marcus Mariota going this week. I think Marcus Mariota, as far as and we'll talk too, we're not just gonna, I know this is the fantasy football podcast, but I'll make my predictions and all that for this podcast and talk a little bit about the game after I get done with the fantasy and all that. But I just don't think, I think Marcus Mariota, he's going to have a decent game, I feel. But I don't think it's going to be a really good fantasy football game or anything like that. If you need a quarterback, and like I said, we're going to do how we did last week, okay? We're going to talk about a game, talk about each quarterback, each position. But the next segment, because I know it's daily fantasy, so you can't pick up all these guys or do anything like that. It's not like the regular fantasy, Yahoo fantasy football or anything like that. So we're going to talk, and we're going to kind of rank them as the show goes on, as we bring in more players to talk about. All right, so right now, Marcus Mariota. If you're thinking about picking up a quarterback, it's not him. Okay, I don't trust him. And like I said, I just don't think he's going to have a good fantasy football type of game. As for Tennessee's defense, they played well in the second half, but I don't think the rush defense is going to play well, I feel, but I don't think as far as fantasy football points go, they're not going to be putting up too many. So I'm staying away from Tennessee's defense unless Tom Brady has the bad game of all bad games, but I don't see that happening. Speaking of Tom Brady, if you've noticed and checked the stat lines last few weeks, Tom Brady hasn't been playing well. All right, Tom Brady's not out here throwing for 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns like he used to. Tom Brady's out here throwing for 1 touchdown, 2 touchdowns on a good day. All right, I don't think Tom Brady is going to have the ultimate Tom Brady game this weekend. All right, I don't think he's going to turn the ball over or anything like that, but I mean, he'll probably go for around 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like Alex Smith numbers last week. And let's see. I know. All right, yeah, so we'll just talk about that and we'll rank them later. So, yeah, I think he's going to go maybe around 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. If you need to play it safe and need someone who's going to put up those kind of numbers, then Tom Brady's your guy. Okay? So I think he's going to do that. Brandon Cooks, Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola. Obviously, Tom Brady's got to throw someone the ball if he's going to throw over 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. All right? That someone might just be Gronk. If you need a tight end, just like I said, Travis Kelce was a must-start last week. Sorry he got hurt. Didn't think that was going to happen. Didn't know that was going to happen. I think Gronk is that must-start tight end this week. Tennessee's not going to be able to handle him, I don't think. And like I said, Rob Gronkowski's just been a monster among men all year long. All right. No one's been able to stop him. I don't think it's going to happen this week. I think he's going to go off for a big game. So I think that's where most of Tom Brady's production is going to go. The 2 touchdowns, I think that's going to go towards Gronk. All right, I'm kind of scared of going with a guy like Chris Hogan, going with a guy like Danny Amendola, and going with a guy like Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks has been probably one of the biggest fantasy disappointments all year this season, I feel. All right? We all thought Brandon Cooks isn't a bad receiver by any means. We thought, you know what, he played well with New Orleans. Now he's going to be Tom Brady's number 1 receiver, and he's going to have a big year. That did not happen at all this season. It just didn't work. All right. So I'm kind of staying away. I am staying away from Brandon Cooks, staying away from Chris Hogan, staying away from Danny Amendola. Now let's talk about Dion Lewis. I had him on my ESPN fantasy team this year for like the last few weeks once he started getting the ball a whole bunch more. He was a solid, consistent performer. Okay? I don't think he's going to have that big of a game this week. I think it's the Kareem Hunt situation. All right, granted, I know that Andy Reid refused to give the ball to Kareem Hunt last week. He only had 11 carries. Andy Reid refused to run the ball all last week, actually. He only had like 15 combined carries from all three people. One of them was to Tyreek Hill, and then I think Alex Smith had like 3 carries. All right, so I'm staying away from Dion Lewis. I mean, he could get those red zone opportunities. So that's like the biggest thing right there. That's the scariest part about it. If New England gets near the red zone, or near the goal line, I should say, yeah, they get near the goal line, chances are Dion Lewis is going to get that ball. So if you're picking up Dion Lewis, you're pretty much banking on him scoring 2 touchdowns, because as far as yardage goes, I don't think Dion Lewis is going to perform well. All right. So, like I said, if you're on the fence about Dion Lewis, the only reason you're picking him up is because you think that he's going to be able to pull off a couple of goal line touchdowns. If not, I'm staying away from him. Like I said, I just don't think he's going to be able to rack up enough yards in order to have an impact on the fantasy football game. Okay? And as far as New England's defense goes, they're probably the worst defense out of the 8 teams that are left. They give up a bunch of yards. They don't really give up too many points, but they don't create turnovers, really. They don't really get too many sacks. I think week 17, James Harrison did have 2 sacks, but those were both last-minute garbage time sacks. And when I say last minute, I literally mean like last drive of the game. Okay, so I don't trust New England's defensive line, and I don't trust their secondary to create turnovers. I know Marcus Mariota helps him out a little bit with his bad decisions so far this year, but I'm staying away from New England's defense also. All right, so just to recap, and then after I recap what I had just said, we're going to talk a little bit more about the football side of the game and make my pick. Okay, so Marcus Mariota, don't trust him. Probably the quarterback you should stay away from. Derrick Henry, that's a start right there. Not a must start, but that's the guy you probably want on your team this week. Delaney Walker, the rest of their receiving core, really don't trust them too much. Tennessee's defense, don't think that they're going to be able to create enough turnovers or do anything special to pick them up. Tom Brady, he's probably going to go for 250 yards, 2 touchdowns. So if you need you need however many points that would be, can't remember exactly off the top of my head. But if you need that amount right there, that type of game from someone, and you know it's going to happen, Tom Brady's your guy. Dion Lewis, the only way you pick him up is if you think that he's going to be able to get to the goal line and get a couple of touchdowns that way, because I don't think he's going to pick up very many yards. Kind of nervous as far as Chris Hogan, Danny Amendola, and Brandon Cooks go. Rob Gronkowski, that's a must start. And like I said, I really don't trust New England's defense. They give up a lot of yards, not too many points, but they don't create turnovers. They get too many sacks. So, what do I think is going to happen in this game? New England's going to win this one. Rob Gronkowski's going to have a big game. All right. And I think it's going to be closer than what people think, but like 10 points close. So I got the Patriots in this one. I think Dion Lewis might get a touchdown near the goal line. I think that's going to happen. But I'm not sure if you could really rely on that. Plus, we're going to talk about the Jaguars-Pittsburgh Steelers game next. So we got a couple of running backs in that one that we could talk about that you might be able to pick up. And I understand that it costs money to pick these guys up in daily fantasy. And I know, not like actual money, but they give you a budget to use on your team. So, yeah, I got the Patriots winning in this one. Like I said, Rob Gronkowski's going to play well, and I just don't trust Marcus Mariota to have a good game in this one. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Next up, we're going to be talking Jags-Steelers. So stay tuned, and we will be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. And that last segment we talked about the Patriots and Titans game, talked about which players you should pick up, talked about which players you should stay away from. All right, stay away from Marcus Mariota, pick up Derrick Henry. I'd stay away from the Tennessee Titans receiving corps. All right, defense, really no one excites me there. Or the defense as a whole just doesn't excite me. Let's see. Tom Brady, he's probably going to go for around 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, I feel. Dion Lewis, I don't think he's going to have too many yards, but he could go for a couple of goal line touchdowns maybe. But that's like an if. I don't know if you really want to rely on that. Because like I said, I really don't think he's going to put up too many yards on the ground. So it's pretty much if you're picking him up, you're hoping that he's going to score a couple of touchdowns. And let's see, on the receiving end for the Patriots, Rob Gronkowski is the only guy that I feel is a must start in that game. He's going to go for a couple of touchdowns, definitely going to have over 100 yards, I feel. And let's see, who else? Oh yeah, the defense, don't trust the defense. They give up a bunch of yards. Don't give up too many points, but they really don't produce too many sacks because their defensive line is really weak. And they're not good enough to create turnovers. So that's pretty much what the last segment was talked about. I did a little quick, 2-minute rundown of that right there, minute and a half. So now let's talk about probably going to be the game of the weekend. Jacksonville facing off with the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right. Where do we want to start off? This is kind of like, this is the most intriguing game to me because as far as fantasy football goes, like there's so much that could happen. Like it's going to go one way or it's going to go the complete other. There's no gray area here. It's either going to be black or white, no gray. All right, no leeway or anything like that. There's only 2 possible ways it could go, and like I said, it's just there's no gray area for this game. So let's start off with the. Should we start off with the Jags, or let's start off with the Jags because there's a lot to say about the Steelers. That's where most of the intrigue comes from. All right, so let's go. Blake Bortles. What do we think of him this weekend? I don't think that he's... again, this is daily fantasy right here, so it's not like you need multiple quarterbacks or anything like that. You're going to go with one guy. I don't think Blake Bortles is that guy you go with. I don't trust him. I definitely do not trust him. All right. He's been playing poorly the last 3 games against San Francisco, against Tennessee, and against who did they play last week? Buffalo. Sorry, drew a blank right there. All right, yeah, he just hasn't played well. Pittsburgh secondary isn't that good. They're not even that average. Okay, and now it's pretty much if you're picking up Blake Bortles, you're like, yeah, this guy's definitely going to have a great game. He's going to play really good and all that. I don't think he is, so I'm staying away from Blake Bortles. Okay. Now let's talk about Leonard Fournette. I think he did have one of his best games of the season against Pittsburgh. Last week didn't play well against the Buffalo Bills. Only had around 51 rushing yards. Did have 21 receiving yards, I think it was. Something around there. And I think he's going to go for a big game. And I think he's going to go for at least 100 yards. Pittsburgh's defense, it just doesn't scare me at all. All right, Pittsburgh's defense, like TJ Watt, I take that back. TJ Watt, he scares me. All right, but if I had to pick TJ Watt versus Leonard Fournette, I'm taking Fournette. Okay, and the rest of that the Steelers, they do have a respectable defensive line, front seven. All right, not like a little bit. It's more than respectable. I'm not giving them enough credit. All right, but I'm just taking Leonard Fournette versus that front seven. That's all I'm saying. All right, I think he's going to go for at least 100 yards. He is a factor in the Jaguars' offensive receiving game plan. Okay, so he's going to pick up a few catches. Like I said, he's probably going to go for around 20 to 30 yards receiving again. And I think he's going to pick up at least a touchdown. So Leonard Fournette, I feel like he might be a surefire start this week. Last week he let me down, but I think this week is when he picks it up. All right, now let's talk Jaguars receivers. D.D. Westbrook, Marquise Lee, Allen Hurns. D.D. Westbrook maybe, the rest of them. Actually, I don't know. This is where the difficult part comes in right here. This is it. This all depends on what Blake Bortles does against this weak Pittsburgh secondary. And I can't decide. I'm torn about it. This is the hardest game to pick this weekend. All right? Jaguars, for them to win this game, it's going to take Blake Bortles to just play all right. All right? And I'm not sure if he could do that. I'm not sure if Blake Bortles could be average. He scares me. And you know what? I mean, there's been talk about that. People have been he's been asked questions about, you know what? Do you see these people talking about you saying that you're not that good? And Blake Bortles just had to address it. So, I mean, he's going to have it in the back of his mind this weekend playing the Steelers that, you know what, I am a good quarterback and stuff. And we're all humans, and stuff like that does affect you, and it does motivate you. Unless you let it get to you. So, I mean, Blake Bortles is going to have that in the back of his mind, possibly motivating him, and that could be what puts him over the edge and has him play well. So, as of right now, as far as the Jaguars receivers go, I would stay away from him. D.D. Westbrook might be the only guy I'd pick up, but that'd be as a number 3 option, number 2 option. But I don't trust him right now just because of Blake Bortles, all right? And, I mean, as far as the 3 quarterbacks that I've talked about so far, Blake Bortles, Mariota, Tom Brady. Tom Brady's the guy you pick up. But let's talk about the 4th quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger. Last time he played the Jags, I think he threw 5 interceptions? The Jaguars had him contemplating whether or not he had it after the game. When I say had it, I mean had the ability to still be a good quarterback. The Jacksonville Jaguars defense made him question that. All right? I'm staying away from Big Ben this weekend. I think there's other options that you can go with. Like a guy like I said, Tom Brady out of these 4 quarterbacks is the guy you pick up. But like I said, Tom Brady isn't going to go for a big game or anything like that. He's going to have a nice, safe game, 250 yards, 2 touchdowns, I feel. Big Ben, I don't think he's going to have as bad as a game as he had last time against Jacksonville. But there's not much you can do against this defense. You can't put up big numbers against this defense. It just doesn't happen unless you're Jimmy Garoppolo. All right, you cannot put up big numbers against this defense. Like I said, it's nearly impossible. That's how good they are. That's why they're the best defense in the league. All right, and yeah, so I don't trust Ben. I mean, I'm not, like I said, this is the part where it's going to be one way or the other. It's either Steelers offense is going to play well. Big Ben, he's not going for more than 2 touchdowns. I'll tell you that much. Good game is 2 touchdowns, near 300 yards, maybe. Bad game, couple interceptions, a touchdown, maybe. Near 250 yards, probably. All right? So I'm not trusting Big Ben to do it. Let's talk Le'Veon Bell now. This is one of the X factors in this game. Le'Veon Bell. All right? Do we trust Le'Veon Bell versus this Jacksonville front 7? I'm not sure if I do. Let me see if I could pull up his stats from this season against Jacksonville real quick on the laptop. Let's see. But going back to how I was talking, like I said, I got it right here. He had 15 carries for 47 yards. That scares me. I understand that it was early on in the season and that it's a different team. I mean, they're both different teams, but that 15 carries, 47 yards, that scares me a lot right there. Did have 10 receptions. Okay. I'm not sure how many yards he had right there for the reception numbers, but I'm not sure I can even trust Le'Veon Bell against, Jacksonville's defense is going to be that defense. If you're playing daily fantasy in the playoffs, you really want to stay away from whatever offensive players are playing against that defense, all right? So, I mean, Le'Veon Bell, I think he's going to be better than what he was, but I'm not sure. Like I said, he's going to have a good football game, but I don't think Le'Veon Bell's going to have a good fantasy football game. So I think I'm going to stay away from Le'Veon Bell this week. All right. Let's talk Steelers wide receivers. Let's talk with the most intriguing one, I guess, Antonio Brown. Coming off a torn calf muscle, it's been about 3 weeks of him rehabbing it. Do not pick up Antonio Brown. Do not do that. Right now, do not. That's the most I'm sure about. Do not pick up Antonio Brown. Stay away. Don't think Antonio Brown's going to come back. He's going to be a spark. He's going to have a good game. He's not. I'll tell you that much. If I'm the Jaguars, I'm not even putting my best cornerback on him. All right? I'm going to put A.J. Bouye on Antonio Brown. And put Jalen Ramsey on Juju Smith-Schuster. All right? Antonio Brown, stay away. Don't pick him up. He's not going to have a good game. I'll tell you that much. All right? So that's one we got out the way. Martavis Bryant. I don't trust him either. All right? This Jacksonville defense is that good. They made Ben Roethlisberger think about retirement after they played him. All right? So, I'm staying away from Martavis Bryant and Juju Smith-Schuster. This is the X factor of the game. I know I said it was Le'Veon Bell, but if I had to pick between Le'Veon Bell and Juju Smith-Schuster being the X factor, it's Juju Smith-Schuster. If Juju Smith-Schuster does not have a big game, or at least a good game, Pittsburgh doesn't win this game. I tell you that much. Okay? And I'm not sure if he even is going to be able to have a good game, because like I said, if I'm Jacksonville, I'm putting Jalen Ramsey on him. I'm just having Jalen Ramsey just shadow him the entire game. And let's say that they do put Jalen Ramsey on Antonio Brown. A.J. Bouye is a top 5 cornerback in this league. That's not a drop off, like that much of a drop off, if any, from those two cornerbacks, from Jalen Ramsey to A.J. Bouye. All right. So, I'm really staying away from Pittsburgh's offense in this game. That's how good Jacksonville's defense is. All right. The only guy I'm picking up on Pittsburgh's offense is going to be Le'Veon Bell, but that's like, you have to have like all the faith in the world in him to be picking him up this weekend. And Juju Smith-Schuster. Those are the two guys you pick up. But like I said, you got to be like personally, I would not pick them up. But if you're thinking about it, you just got to I don't know. I don't see it. All right. So I'm pretty much staying like it's another Buffalo Bills, Jacksonville Jaguars game. Leonard Fournette is probably the best, most surefire thing in this game. Last week he wasn't, like I said, but this week I think he's going to have a big game. So you got that. Now let's talk defenses. I'm all in on Jacksonville's defense in this game. I'm doing it. I'm sticking to it. If you want to pick up Jacksonville's defense, pick them up. They're going to have a few sacks. They might have an interception or two. I think Jacksonville's defense could be good. Stay away from Pittsburgh's defense. Please stay away. All right? So Jacksonville's defense, yes. Pittsburgh's defense, no. All right. And let's see. Anything else? Anyone else I'm missing? Steelers tight ends, they're not going to be a factor. Neither are Jacksonville. So that's all I got to say about that game. As for my pick, this is tough. I might make one pick on this fantasy football show because tomorrow I'm making picks for the GSMC Sports Podcast and GSMC Football Podcast. I might switch. Right now, I'm leaning towards Jacksonville. So as of right now, Jacksonville is my pick, but that could change tomorrow. So, yeah. Like I said, Blake Bortles, not a good fantasy football quarterback. Big Ben, staying away from him. Tom Brady, out of the 4 quarterbacks I've talked about so far in the show, is the quarterback you pick up. Leonard Fournette should be a good option. Le'Veon Bell, don't really trust him. Don't trust anyone in the Steelers' offense, especially Antonio Brown. Stay away from him. That's my surefire lockdown pick right there. All right, and as far as Jacksonville's receivers go, don't really trust him either because of Blake Bortles. So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Next up, we're going to be taking over talking about the Philadelphia Eagles and Atlanta Falcons game. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Alright, and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. So far in the show, we've talked about the Jacksonville Jaguars. We talked about the AFC Divisional games. Alright, we talked about 4 quarterbacks so far. 4. Blake Bortles, Marcus Mariota, Big Ben, Tom Brady. As of right now, the best quarterback to pick out of those 4 is Tom Brady. We're going to talk about 2 more quarterbacks. We're going to talk about Matt Ryan and Nick Foles in this segment. All right? But we're not going to do that right now. I got to recap because that's what we do on the show. We recap and then we talk. All right? So, as of right now, the 4 quarterbacks, Tom Brady's the guy. We've talked about a few running backs, Le'Veon Bell, Leonard Fournette, Deion Lewis, Derrick Henry. Out of those 4, the 2 I'm taking, Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry. All right? We talked about each team's receiving core. Rob Gronkowski, that's a must start this weekend. Get him on your team. Let's see, Pittsburgh's receivers. I don't trust any of the receivers. If you're gonna go pick up a receiver, it's got to be in the NFC this weekend. All right, I don't see any of these receivers having big games. Okay, Rob Gronkowski, like I said, he's gonna take most of Brady's production. I feel. Don't trust Brandon Cooks, Danny Amendola, Chris Hogan. Don't trust Rashard Matthews, Eric Decker, Corey Davis, Delaney Walker. I don't trust Antonio Brown. Not Martavis Bryant, not Juju Smith-Schuster. Definitely don't trust D.D. Westbrook, Marquise Lee, Allen Hurns. That's because Blake Bortles is their quarterback. All right, so that's how I feel about the receivers. If you're looking to pick one up, head over to the NFC, I feel. All right, let's go defenses now. Out of the 4 I've talked about, Jacksonville's is the most surefire. After that, if you're going to need a defense, head over to the NFC, which we're going to be talking about for these next 2 segments. So, that's the perfect bridge right there. Let's talk NFC divisional games. First off, we got the Atlanta Falcons facing off with the I almost said Jacksonville Jaguars. Maybe it's possible. That might be my Super Bowl pick right there. That may be a sign. All right, no, but Falcons are playing the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's start off with those Eagles. How do we feel about Nick Foles? We're kind of scared. We're kind of scared with Nick Foles. All right. Have no clue how he's going to play in this game. No clue whatsoever. I can't trust him. All right. Like fantasy football, I'm not, like in sports in general, I'm not a risk taker. As far as making picks, picking people for my fantasy teams, I'm not really much of a risk taker. I stick to what I know, you know? Nick Foles is someone I'm not going to roll the dice with this weekend. He could have a good game. I'm not saying Nick Foles is going to play bad. It's a matter of trust. Nick Foles has not given me a reason to trust him. All right? So, I'm staying away from Nick Foles this weekend. He could have a good game. I'm not trying to say Nick Foles is going to play bad. I have no clue. That's the thing. The reason I'm staying away from Nick Foles, I have no clue how he's going to do. All right? He could go for 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, or he could go for less than 200 and 2 interceptions. No clue. Now let's talk Eagles running backs. I think Jay Ajayi, this is going to be the week where Jay Ajayi finally introduces his true self to the Eagles fans. Eagles, if they want to win this game, they're going to have to run the ball. All right? That's no doubt. You have to run the ball if you're the Eagles in this game a bunch of times. J.J. has had a week off to prepare, right? He had the bye week when he went to the Eagles to prepare. And now he's got this bye week to prepare, learn the offense a bunch more. I think this is the game where J.J. plays well. I think he could go for around 100 yards and a touchdown. I think this is it for him right here. LeGarrette Blount, like I said, Eagles are going to have to run the ball a bunch. I think LeGarrette Blount is going to have a good football game, but I don't think he's going to have a good fantasy football game. All right? So if you're deciding between one of the two running backs, because obviously it's a big risk if you decide to go with both of them. If you're deciding between one of the two, J.J. is your guy this weekend. All right? I think he's going to have a good game. Now let's talk Philly receivers. And when I say receivers, I'm also talking about tight ends too. All right? Alshon Jeffrey. Now this is all if Nick Foles is going to have to complete some passes, and I think he is going to throw for a touchdown at least. Alshon Jeffrey is going to get most of those yards and one of those touchdowns. All right? So Alshon Jeffrey might be a good second or third option. He's not a number one option. All right? And Zach Ertz. That might be a safe pick right there. Because Nick Foles, he's not going to try anything new or anything different. He's going to go to what he knows. Zach Ertz, Alshon Jeffrey are the most reliable options on that offense for him. All right? Not Nelson Aguilar, not Torrey Smith. So if you're going to go with anyone on the receiving core, it's Zach Ertz or Alshon Jeffrey. But like I said, Rob Gronkowski, that's a must start this weekend. So if you got him, then you don't need Ertz. But if you're looking for a tight end, Ertz is your guy. Now let's talk Philly's defense. They have a respectable defense, a good defense. But is this a defense that could play well against Julio Jones, who always shows up in the playoffs? All right, is this a defense who could limit Devontae Freeman? I'm not too sure. This is a tough fantasy football weekend with these games. There's a lot of good matchups that kind of cancel each other out. So yeah, I'm not really trusting Philly's defense, all right? Let's go over to Atlanta's side. Matt Ryan. Last week, believe he had 210 yards, only one touchdown. No interceptions, though. I don't think he's going to change that. I think he's going to have that same kind of stat line this week. So, now we've talked about, 6 quarterbacks? Tom Brady is still the guy you pick up. All right. Matt Ryan, he's a good quarterback. He's going to have a good football game. There's going to be a lot of good football performances this week from players. There's not going to be too many solid fantasy football performances this week. Okay? That's just how it's going to go. It's going to be one of those weeks where, you know what? There's going to be a lot of good games, but not too many good fantasy football games. Matt Ryan is going to be the biggest case of that. Like I said, 210 yards, 250 yards, couple touchdowns, that's respectable. But that's not big fantasy numbers. And I think that's what Matt Ryan's going to do this week. So, I think Tom Brady's going to have the better fantasy football game, but, you could go with either or, I feel. Devontae Freeman. Last week had 16 carries, had 68 yards and a touchdown. I think he's going to do better than what he did last week. All right. The Rams do have a better front seven than the Eagles, so I think he's going to play better. Probably go for around 80 yards and a touchdown in this game. Tevin Coleman, he had 14 carries last week, but I don't think that's another good football game. Not good fantasy football performance. Stay away from Tevin Coleman this week. All right? He's just not going to be the guy that you start on your fantasy football team. All right, let's talk Julio Jones. Like I said, Julio Jones plays well in the playoffs. Julio Jones showed me last week that he's going to be good. I like Julio Jones. I'm going to start Julio Jones. That's going to be my number one guy right there. All right. If you need that true number one receiver, it's Julio Jones. I think he's going to play well. Had 9 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown last week. Not sure what his production is going to look like this week, but it's going to be similar to that. All right. I think he's going to bring in a touchdown or two. So Julio Jones, that's a start right there. Mohamed Sanu, he's a third option. Okay. That's a third option right there. So if you need one, Mohamed Sanu's your guy. If not, Atlanta tight ends really don't intrigue me or anything like that. I'm staying away from them. Taylor Gabriel, no. Not betting on him. All right. So that's pretty much where it goes right there. All right, like I said, let me recap. Nick Foles, not sure what he's going to do this weekend, so I'm staying away. Jay Ajayi, going to have a big game, I feel. All right. I think the top 3 running backs right now so far that I've talked about in fantasy are going to be Jay Ajayi, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette number 1, Derrick Henry number 2, then Jay Ajayi. Okay. A receiver for Philly, Alshon Jeffrey. That might be the number 2 you pair with Julio Jones this week. All right. Nick Foles is going to get him the ball because Nick Foles is going to stick to his number 1. That's how it is for every quarterback that's coming in off the bench. I know Nick Foles has started a couple games, but you know what I mean. And same with Zach Ertz. If you're not going with Rob Gronkowski this week, then who is a must start, I feel, who is going to have a big game, then I go with Zach Ertz. So far, out of the tight ends I've talked about. All right. And again, with Atlanta, Matt Ryan, he's going to have a good football game. I don't think he's going to have a good fantasy football game. There's a difference. Okay? Devontae Freeman, think he's going to go for around 80 yards and a touchdown, maybe a few more yards. That's a good option. That's my number 4 right there. Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry, Jay Ajayi, Devontae Freeman. Mohamed Sanu, that might be a third option. Don't really think he's going to do too much. Like, he's going to have a few catches, about 70 yards, but that's it. Tevin Coleman, stay away from him. Stay away from Atlanta's tight ends, okay? And as far as the 2 defenses go, let me rank the defenses so far that we talked about. So it goes Jacksonville at number 1, obviously. Then I'll go Atlanta's at number 2. Philly's at 3. New England's at 4. No, Tennessee's at 4. New England's at 5. Pittsburgh's at 6. The first 3 defenses are the only ones that are worth looking at. All right. And as far as my pick for the game, right now I'm heading towards Atlanta. Still kind of not sure about it. I usually wait all week to make it, but since we do the show on a Thursday, I got to make it now. All right, so I'm going to go with Atlanta. Philly's going to put up a good fight, but I just think Atlanta's going to be too strong of a team. They've been here before. They went to the Super Bowl last year. They know what it takes, all right? So that's going to wrap it up for this segment. Next up, we're going to be talking Drew Brees, Case Keenum, Jerick McKinnon, Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, and the rest of those players in that Minnesota Vikings and New Orleans Saints game. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. This show's been pretty much just fantasy football talk about each of the divisional games going on this weekend. The next game we're going to be doing is the Minnesota Vikings and New Orleans Saints game. Before we do that, you know what we got to do? We got to recap. So let's recap. All right, so we've talked about Tennessee versus New England. We've talked about Jacksonville versus Pittsburgh, and we just finished talking about Atlanta and Philly. All right, we talked about 6 quarterbacks so far. Tom Brady, Marcus Mariota, Ben Roethlisberger, Blake Bortles, Matt Ryan, Nick Foles. All right, that's 6 quarterbacks. You pick one in daily fantasy. Tom Brady's that one you pick out of those 6. Not Big Ben, not Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's going to have a good football game. I don't think he's going to have a good fantasy football game. Ben Roethlisberger. I think he's going to have a bad game, honestly, if we're being honest here. All right, and I'm definitely staying away from Blake Bortles, not trusting Marcus Mariota, not trusting Nick Foles. Not sure what Nick Foles is going to do. All right, we've talked 6 running backs. Technically 7 because of LeGarrette Blount and JHI, but my top 4 so far out of those are Leonard Fournette at number 1, Derrick Henry at number 2, JHI at number 3, Devontae Freeman at number 4. Okay, not Le'Veon Bell, not Deion Lewis. Those are my 4 right there. I don't trust Le'Veon Bell this week. He had 14 carries for 51 yards last time against Jacksonville. No, 14 carries for 47 yards. 15 carries for 47 yards. Excuse me. All right, those are my top 4 running backs. I had a cough right there. Ooh. Talking a lot on the podcast, man. Sometimes you're going to have to cough. But receivers. Again, we're talking tight ends too. I'm not picking up any receivers. Well, wide receivers right here. Let's talk mainly wide receivers right here, okay? I'm not picking up any wide receivers in the AFC. Don't trust Jacksonville's. Don't trust New England's. Don't trust Pittsburgh's. Don't trust Tennessee's. All right? Alshon Jeffrey and Julio Jones are the top 2 I have right now. I feel like they're going to have good games. As far as tight ends go, Rob Gronkowski is a must start. If you're not going to go with him and going to go with someone else, like a Leonard Fournette type, since you got this little budget thing in the daily fantasy, then you go Zach Ertz. That's number 2. Delaney Walker's at number 3. Yeah. All right. So we talked about that. We talked about defenses. Jacksonville, Atlanta, Philly, then Tennessee, then Pittsburgh, then New England. No, then New England, then Pittsburgh. All right. After Philly, don't pick up those 3 defenses that I mentioned. All right. Don't do that. Stay away. Oh, yeah. And I need to remind you guys throughout the show, do not pick up Antonio Brown. Don't do it. Stay away. He's not going to have a good game. I promise you. Last week, Kareem Hunt was the guy I said to stay away from. Look what happened. You should have stayed away. All right, Antonio Brown is that guy this week. I'm not even saying anything like surprising or anything like that. The guy's coming off a torn calf muscle. No way it's at 100%. He's not going to be able to do well against these Jaguars secondary. Against this Jaguars secondary. All right. So now we recapped. You know what we do after we recap? We talk about what the segment's going to be about. Our segment is going to be about the Minnesota Vikings and New Orleans Saints game. But you already knew that because I mentioned that when we started this segment. All right, so let's get into it. Should we start with Minnesota or should we start with New Orleans? Let's go Minnesota. All right, this is going to be fun. Case Keenum. Look at that. He's had 22 touchdowns so far this season, 7 interceptions. Not sure if I trust him this week. All right. He's gonna have a good game. He's gonna have a good game, but I don't think it's gonna be a good fantasy football game. All right. So it's Case Keenum. I mean, he might be a safe option, but he's not gonna give you a lot of points, and he's not gonna kill your team. Like this year, I had him on my ESPN fantasy team. I finished second in that league. I had Marcus Mariota, and he was just terrible the entire year. All right. I had him up until like week 9. I needed someone who could give me like a solid amount of points week after week so I didn't have to worry about my quarterback. All right, because I had guys like my position players is really where I try to get like my running backs, wide receivers. That's where I try to get the bulk of my points. Wide receiver mainly because I had a bunch of good ones. I guess I had Antonio Brown. I had Antonio Brown for the last few weeks, for like the last 5 weeks of my season because I traded for him. I had Michael Thomas. I had Crabtree and Landry for a bit, but I traded those 2 for Antonio Brown. I had A.J. Green with Michael Thomas at one point. I had when they were playing at their best, I had A.J. Green, Michael Thomas, and Michael Crabtree, and Devontae Adams. All right. I was a fantasy genius so far this season, except for the championship. The guy I played was putting up monster numbers week in, week out, so I really had no chance. But going back to it, Case Keenum, like I said, he's consistent. He's not going to kill your team. That's exactly how it's going to be this weekend. If you pick him up, he's not going to kill your team, but he's not going to win the game for your team. Okay? So if you're wanting to get most of your points from your wide receivers or your running backs, Case Keenum is that quarterback you don't really use too much of your budget on. And he's a safe option. All right. Now let's talk Jerick McKinnon, Latavius Murray. It's always a toss-up between these two because you're not sure who's going to have the best game. If I had to pick running backs, I wouldn't really go near any of these two. They could have good fantasy games, but I'd go with the four that I've ranked already. All right. If I had to choose, I'm going Leonard Fournette and Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette or J.J. or Leonard Fournette and Devontae Freeman. Jerick McKinnon and Latavius Murray just aren't those guys that you pick up and start this week. All right. Let's go wide receiver. Adam Thielen. I like Adam Thielen. If you can get him with Julio Jones and Alshon Jeffrey, if you could get that as your three receivers, you're in good shape, I feel. All right. This is a playoff game, big game. Pressure might get to Case Keenum a little bit. So what he's going to throw to the most surefire option that he knows is always going to be open and always going to be able to catch the ball. That's Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen's going to have a big game this weekend, I feel. Stephon Diggs, you're kind of living life on the edge right there. Stephon Diggs is hit or miss. I'm not going Stephon Diggs this week. I'm staying away, okay? I'm staying away from Stephon Diggs. Kyle Rudolph, I think that's a solid option this week if you're not going with Rob Gronkowski. It's either you'd be safe with going with him or Ertz, I feel. All right, so Kyle Rudolph in my ranking so far in the show, that's my third tight end. Ertz is still my second. Then Gronk is my first. Okay? So that's the Minnesota Vikings offense. Now here's the tricky part. Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram did not play well last week. I don't trust him to play well this week. Minnesota's defense is light years better than Carolina's. Carolina's linebackers had the formula on how to stop Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara. Minnesota's defense is smart. They got the formula on how to stop those two too, I believe. Two also, I believe. Excuse my language, my English. All right? So, I'm not going with Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram. I still think the four that I've mentioned already are better options. Okay? Then you got Drew Brees. What do we do with Drew? Stay away. Don't pick up Drew. Go Tom Brady this week. Tom Brady's the quarterback. Tom Brady's your guy. Pick him up. All right? Stay away from Drew Brees. I don't trust him against... I feel bad saying that because I love Drew Brees, one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. I just don't think Drew Brees is going to have a good fantasy football game. There, I said it. All right, so I'm not trusting Drew Brees. I'm not saying he's going to have like a terrible game or anything like that, but he's going to throw for maybe 2 touchdowns, around 250 yards. So he's going to have like a Tom Brady game, but the thing is, I think he's going to throw an interception, and I don't think Tom Brady is. All right, so that's what I have for Drew Brees right there. Michael Thomas, you could pick him up. Michael Thomas is safe, I think. Xavier Rhodes is going to be... is Michael Thomas safe? I don't know. Drew Brees has to throw it to someone. Someone's got to catch it. I think that's going to be Michael Thomas. All right? Michael Thomas is a safe option, I feel. But again, my 3 receivers I'm going with, Julio Jones, Alshon Jeffrey, Adam Thielen. All right? Michael Thomas should have a decent game, but it's iffy. It's if he's going to be better than Xavier Rhodes. All right? And you know what? That brings me to the final part. The defenses. I'm not picking up New Orleans. Minnesota's yes. Okay? I think Minnesota is going to be able to pick off Drew Brees at least once. And I think that they're going to come up with a few sacks. Okay? They're going to have a good game. All right, so now let's rank them all. Let's go quarterbacks, okay? We got 8 quarterbacks. Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Case Keenum, Matt Ryan, Big Ben, Nick Foles, Marcus Mariota, Blake Bortles. Those are my rankings. Running backs. I'm not going to do every running back because that would take too long. All right? I'm going to go Leonard Fournette, Derrick Henry. I'm going to switch it. Devontae Freeman at 3. All right. J.J. at 4. Kamara, Ingram. Kamara, doesn't matter. McKinnon, Murray, Bell. Again, I don't think Bell's going to play well. All right? That's one of them. I'm kind of going off on the edge right here. Okay, I don't think Bell's going to play well. Then, I think that's it. Yeah. Then you got, Murray, McKinnon, all them. I named them already. Wide receivers. Julio, Thielen, Alshon, then Michael Thomas, Sanu, Juju Smith-Schuster, Stephon Diggs, then Juju Smith-Schuster. Not even going to name Antonio Brown because he's not going to be a factor. Okay. No one on, and then that's pretty much it. I don't trust any AFC receivers this week. Maybe Juju Smith-Schuster. That's a tongue twister right there. All right. Tight ends, it goes Gronk, Rudolph, Ertz. I mean, those are interchangeable. Then Delaney Walker. That's pretty much it. You don't really need to pick tight ends from those other teams. All right, and then defenses, we'll go Jaguars, Minnesota, Atlanta, New Orleans, Philly. Those are kind of interchangeable. Then that's 5. Or we got 3 more. Let's see. I guess New England or Tennessee, New England, Pittsburgh. All right, that's how it goes. Now let me make my pick for the game. My pick, I'm going to go Minnesota over New Orleans. All right. So that's actually going to wrap it up for today's show. All right, we talked about each, recapped, told you my rankings, told you who I liked. I got a lot of them right last week. Hopefully I can get a lot of them right this week, all right? So like I said, that's going to wrap it up. Next week we'll be doing the AFC Championship games, NFC Championship games, and then we'll talk about anything else in fantasy football, all right? So like I said, stay tuned for next Thursday. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.